So thank you everyone for coming out today. This event is part of our Legacy Series, and the LGBT Center does a Legacy Series every year. And this year we've chosen the theme Radical Joy to kind of be the umbrella which all the events are under. So we were thinking about how love and community and celebration can be weaponized in the face of adversity, and that's the theme that all of our events center around, and Teak and Kim Milan embody that concept. So we are so excited for them to be here today, and we're so grateful. And you can check out the rest of our events on our Facebook page. There are beautiful posters by Jessica Jang all over campus, so make sure to check those out. They're purple, they're great. And thank you to DJ and Deshana. Deshana is the LGBT Center programmer, and DJ is the student programmer who spearheaded this event, and they put in some amazing work to make this happen today. Thank you, Jessica, again, for the posters specifically for this event, which were also beautiful. We also want to thank our sponsors, which are the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America, the Kogut Center for the Humanities, the Department of American Studies, the Pembroke Center, the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, and the Department of Africana Studies, Rights and Reason for their support with this event. And just to kind of introduce Teak and Kim a little bit, so Teak Milan speaks and writes about intersectional leadership, transgender rights, and racial justice. He shares stories of his life and how his transgender experience has informed his views on masculinity, race, and the gender binary. A journalist for over a decade, his work has appeared on Mic, BuzzFeed, NBC, and CNN. He is also a strategic media consultant, helping organizations and companies create detailed media campaigns that will engage diverse audiences in ways that are inclusive and authentic. And Kim Katrine Milan is the co-founder and executive director of the People Project, an initiative to bring forth local and international community development for queer and trans folks of color and their allies through alternative education, art activism, and collaboration. She is also one of the owners of the Glad Day Bookshop, the oldest LGBT bookstore in the world. Kim has contributed to Cosmopolitan, MTV, NBC, Larry King Now, BuzzFeed, and the CBC, among other media outlets. Teak and Kim travel throughout the US and Canada discussing love and authentic allyship as tools for radical change. Their 2016 TED Talk, A Queer Vision of Love and Marriage, has been viewed nearly 1 million times. So their talk is going to be an hour long, and that will be followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. So y'all should also have eval forms that you can fill out after the event is over, and we will collect them on your way out. And you should also have index cards, so feel free to use those to write your questions down. If you don't feel comfortable asking them out loud. So without further ado, Teak and Kim.
Thank y'all for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It means so much for us to get to be here together. We often tour around a few different places, and it's really lucky when we get to kind of meet up and get to do this together and get to talk about kind of the anchor that kind of keeps us going as we do this work. So this theme, soft on the person, hard on the issue, was something that I had been thinking about for a few years and really came up as a reoccurring theme in our TED Talk also. But as a practice or a philosophy of what it means for us to be people in love with each other, but people also deeply in love and committed to the community work that we do. And I think that coming from very different backgrounds as we do, we both, put ourselves very much on the line in the work that we do, and I think that it can mean that we need to be very vigilant about the issues that are very important to us, but also what it looks like for us to be soft on each other so that we can really continue to sustain that work and sustain each other as people. Yeah. And that has been something we've kept coming back to.
Yeah, and it's hard work. It's definitely hard work doing this work, and particularly looking at now, it's always hard for us as queer people, as Black, queer, and trans people in this world, and thinking about all the systemic issues that are having an effect on our bodies and on our spirits and how we are working through that and carrying that with us every day, and just being vigilant about how we are hard on these issues not being hard on each other, and taking out on each other all of the frustrations and all of the fear and all of the pain that we have to experience every day, from things that are very aggressive to the microaggressions, to the insincerity that we sometimes feel from other people, feeling like this administration, our government, this country, these policies are hell-bent on killing us and not creating space for us. We have to be more vigilant about creating space for ourselves and making sure that our love flourishes and manifests in the work that we do.
And I think also we've talked about the way that hurt people.
Right.
That so often, as marginalized folks who experience an enormous amount of violence at the hands of multiple systems, often experience rejection from our families, our churches, our communities,
Right.
that we do have a lot of body-based trauma that we hold on to. And I think that there's a really deep need for us to be engaged in a process of healing, so that we're not re-traumatizing each other based on the ways that we have learned to be hurt, and not to continue to pass that on. So there is a lot, I think, to unpack through that, and we're going to kind of move through what that means for us. And for us, this experience that our liberation is intersectional, intergenerational, and queer and trans inclusive, that we're really operating on a basis that it's either all of us or none of us. We really want to take everybody with us. And I think that we've often seen in a lot of historical political organizing movements where certain groups of people will get their rights first and then will come back for everyone else. And that often doesn't work that way. That really, until we see our rights as being interconnected and inalienable, then we won't be able to allow this fractured breaking off of individual parts of our community rights. They really have to be something that happen together. We have to be as equally outraged, as equally hurt when, for me as a cisgender person, when I witness the erosion of rights of transgender people, whether or not my partner is trans, that is besides the point. We have to be able to stay really deeply connected to a sense of empathy that allows us to be motivated to make sure that those things don't continue to happen to each other. And I also wanted to share this. This is two friends of mine, Siang and Jelani, who are partners and also organizers and activists, and also run like a beautiful diversity dance company together. And to share this, because I think that so often as queer and trans folks, our bodies are politicized so often, whether we choose that or not. But our work and our art and the ways that we occupy space in the world are all deeply interconnected, that there really isn't a way of fracturing those things. And I talk about this a lot, as a mixed race person, as someone who sits at the intersection of many different communities, that often I have been asked to do work, just as a woman, or just as a Black person, or just as a queer person, and it's just not possible, And the way that I'll often reply to that is, I'm not fractions, I'm layers. I'm all of these things at the same time. So I'm not able to engage in these movement building without really having a very cohesive understanding of race, of sex, of gender, of ability. All of those things are necessary, and we can't ask people to break themselves apart in order to make things easier for us to understand.
No? Okay, I'm sorry.
There are lots of trans folks who are not receiving any love from their families, and it's hard for them to create partnerships. So when this does happen, it is a revolutionary act. It's countering this dominant narrative that there's a pathology with transgender people. They're showing that we are happy and healthy, and we are deserving of love.
We like to show that little clip because, obviously Kim and I, we love each other very much, and this is something that we've grown into. It's something that we have cultivated. But there's also a deliberateness to it and an intentionality to it, because we are often pathologized because we are queer and trans, right? It's important for us to live out loud and to love each other out loud as queer and Black people, and say that this love does exist, and this love exists in a way that is healthy and that is progressive. Oftentimes when we talk about trans people, we have these siloed narratives, right? Like there's the narrative that all trans people were born in the wrong body. My whole thing is, I reject that for me. I wasn't born in the wrong body. It's this binary kind of structure of gender that said that I was wrong, that didn't create space for me, right? In the same vein as, I think that there is obviously a lot of value in the resilience of trans and queer people and of black people and the strength that we have to overcome, but that is not our only narrative, right? We are resilient, we are strong, but we are full of love, right? And we are full of compassion. You know, I come from a big black working class family, and they have done nothing but love me. They've loved me wholeheartedly. They've loved me since I came out as a lesbian at 14 to when I came out as a trans man in my 20s to being the man that I am today. And that has to be a part of our narrative. And that has to be out there all the time so that we can complicate our human experience and complicate what it means to be queer and trans in this world.
And you've even talked about that you know, when you're, like, that was one of your mother's, like, primary concerns,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, my mother's primary concern when I transitioned, one was my safety. You know, I remember my mother went to see Brokeback Mountain, right? My mom, I'm serious. My mom was really good about going to movies by herself. That was her jam. She was always going to the show by herself. And I remember she went to go see Brokeback, and she called me, and she was crying. She was like, "I just watched that movie, and I would just die if something happened to you. I just need you to be safe." Oh, it's like she was just hysterical, right? You know, she was really, really moved by that, and she was afraid for me. So it was my safety, and also she was afraid that no one was going to love me. She was there for me when I had went through heartbreak during my transition, when I was in community, and it was hard for me to find my footing within queer spaces or within lesbian spaces. She saw how hard it was for me. She saw my isolation, and her whole thing was like, who is going to love my child for who they are? Who's not going to break my child's heart? Like when I got my heart broken, she called me crying. She was like, "I'm hurt too. My heart is broken for you too." You know, so that's why this is so important. You know, it's important for me as a legacy to my mother. You know, I told her story yesterday. She passed away a couple years ago. To every day to be a person who is loved and who is embodying love and who is using this love and this joy as a way of creating radical change and for me being the change that I want to see in this world.
I think for us also, it's really important. So much of the work that I have done has been around alternative education and working a lot with queer and trans youth. And I think a big part of the ways that we can feel monstrous is this absence of a reflection in our society, in our art, in our culture, in our education. And so a big part of one of the things I had to do was really reach as far back as I could in order to really reflect to myself and the rest of my community that we've actually always been here. That queer and trans love is not new, it's not modern, it's something that's very ancestral and very old and has its roots in communities literally across the globe. And I think that being deprived of that kind of representation, being deprived of cultural representation is one of those things that makes people feel like we don't deserve to exist and we don't deserve to inherit that kind of love. And I think especially, you know, I'm based out of Toronto and I'm based out of Canada. You know, there are a good 600 Indigenous communities across Canada, and within most of them, there are 2, if not 3 different other ways of talking about different gendered people. You know, and so if we took that into consideration, that's a good like 1,200 different ways of recognizing gender on one part of the world alone. And, you know, and I think that we have to understand that the way that colonization has functioned has really deprived us of that access to those kinds of stories, because so much of colonization has been about imposing a standard. You know, Teek talked about the Hijra of India yesterday, and, you know, the Hijra prior to British colonization, they were, you know, primary landowners. And once they imposed the census, and the census, you know, was really tracking men in one particular way and women, they said if you were neither of these people, then you don't deserve to access wealth. And that unseated them from their position of power. And today we still see that the Hijra people are in an increasingly vulnerable position in their communities. But this is not because we were not there. This is actually because of an active erasure of our communities. And that's why we actively have to go back and really pull and archive those stories so that we can see that we really have always been here. And I think, you know, as African diasporic people or people with African ancestry, you know, I think that, again, often it is told that this is something that is like a European import, you know, that it isn't something that belongs to the continent, it isn't something that belongs to the Caribbean, but again, in communities across the continent, if we go far, far back, we see that we have always been here. And we haven't always been here in these ways that are peripheral to communities, but ways that have been deeply integral. You know, Two-Spirit people in indigenous communities have played important roles of being able to act as mediators between genders, have been played important roles in terms of being able to act cohesively in building communities and cultures. So communities have recognized that queer and trans people have unique skills and values that allow them to knit together fabric and fiber. And I think that that is something that for me is so important, of understanding how valuable love can be. Because it is because of that ability to love and that ability to understand across multiple experiences that gives us this passion, this empathy that is unique. And I think that when we can value people for their uniqueness, value people for their differences, then we all collectively are able to grow from that. I think so often when we talk about building communities, we really want to emphasize sameness. And I think that that is really misguided, because we are deeply different, and that's what's joyous about us. You know, it's not our differences that divide us, it's our inability to celebrate and recognize those differences. And that, for me, I think is one of those beautiful values that comes from growing up in queer community, learning just how vibrantly different we all can be and how necessary we all are to our communities.
Yeah. And also, I think, like, we're thinking about, like, remembering our past and having a sense of history, you know, and having a sense of history that doesn't, like, begin and end with the struggle, because then what that also does is start to define us in relation to white supremacy, defining us in relation to, like, transphobia and sexism. You know, when we go, like, you know, Kim always says that, you know, history starts when the soldiers arrive. I love when you say that, by the way. You know, history starts when the soldiers arrive. But, you know, when we go past that, we can see, like, our value, like this organic value of, like, who we are and how we were before this happened, before you know, the central focus of who we are had to be in relation to our struggle, had to be about how hard we are working to, you know, make people understand the complexity of our humanity. So that's why it's so important for us to be intentional about finding a historical narrative that talks about our value in this world outside of colonization.
And I love this. Adela Hernandez is Cuba's first transgender public official. I just came back from Cuba, like, literally a day ago. And this quote, you know, sexual preference does not determine whether you are revolutionary or not. That comes from within. And even though it doesn't determine that, what we find so often historically is that queer and trans people are so present in every revolutionary movement. You know, whether we want to talk about the way that Bayard Rustin was the right hand of Martin Luther King and was so present in organizing so much of that, or we can think about just, you know, Marsha P. Johnson and just the amount of times that queer and trans people have extended our love to people who won't give it back, who have extended our humanity to people who don't recognize ours, because we do believe intrinsically in that connection, you know? And I think that despite the fact that being marginalized has been a really deep part and a painful part of our history, we have always found solace in the ways that we build together and create safer spaces for ourselves and each other. That even when we build those communities, we are thinking about everybody in a really present way. We talked about this, you know, in the ways that, again, like Marsha P. Johnson, I think she's such a great example of that historical narrative.
Yeah. And you know, it's just, you know, we like to bring this into the space just to reiterate that we have always been here, right? Even when there has been an erasure of our values, an erasure of our bodies and of our integrity, you know, it's important for us to, like, go back and fetch it. Like, I have this tattoo on my arm, and it's of Sankofa, right? And Sankofa, you know, literally means to go back and fetch it. To know who you are, you have to know where you've been, and it's an illustration of a bird going forward, looking backward, and dropping an egg, right? This egg of knowledge, right? So it's important for us to always, you know, to ask questions and to ask the question, like, where was I? Where were we during this fight? Because we were always there.
So I talk about this idea of reframing the golden rule, you know? So the golden rule suggests that we should treat people the way that we want to be treated. But that assumes that we are the standard for other people's experiences, and we're not. And so what I suggest is that we treat people the way that they want to be treated, which means we have to ask. which really reframes this idea of what it means to love one another. And I think that that's really fundamentally important. You know, a big part of when Teague and I fell in love with each other, it was between the first 3 days of us knowing each other, we shared over 3,000 Facebook messages with each other before we'd even seen each other's faces. You know, really, we just talked it out.
Yeah.
And I think, and a big part of that was really trying to ask each other, you know, like how do you want to be loved? And I think one of the questions I even asked, you know, were like, where are the places that you feel most vulnerable? Like, what are the dreams that you still need to achieve? Like, how can I understand the ways you need to be loved and figure out if I can do that for you? Because so often I feel like we get to this place where we haven't articulated those things, and we're sort of hoping that the other person knows and they're gonna get it, and then we're mad when they don't. But and I think, you know, for both of us, we just really needed to lay it all on the table because of the people that we are. We didn't want there to be any misunderstandings about what we want or what we needed, and I think that allowed us to love each other in ways that were a lot more honest. And I think in general, that doesn't have to be something that's practiced just in the context of a romantic relationship, but in all of the relationships that I have with people, of what does it mean, like, how do you want to be loved? What does safety look like for you? What do you need? Because I know it's not going to be what I need, and I'm going to tell you what I want, but I need to hear that from you too.
Yeah, and too often we project, you know, what we need and how we think somebody needs to be loved because it makes us feel good, right? I remember when my mom was sick. My mother passed away from cancer, and I remember when she was sick, she was going to the doctor, you know, she was going to her appointments, and my aunt Stella, her sister, was going to every appointment with her, right? And my mother called me, and she was like, that goddamn Stella, I wish she'd leave me alone. I want to go and deal with this by myself. I want to be by myself so I can think. She's always in my face. I just want to think, right? Tell her something. So I called my auntie, and I'm like, Auntie, look, Mommy wants to be by herself. Just let her go to these appointments. And she said, your mother doesn't know what she wants. I'm her sister. I'm going. Okay, and I was like, oh, okay. You know, and it was like, you know, in that moment, you know, maybe that was what my auntie would have needed in those moments, right? She would have needed that person there, right? But my mother was being very clear about what she needed, how she wanted to be loved, how she wanted to be cared for, right? And I always say this with Kim, like, you know, when I'm sad and hurt and just, you know, a sad sack, you know, I just want to be sad by myself. Like, let me just be in this little corner. Don't talk to me. Don't touch me. Let me just be over here and let me just work through this, right?
And I hate that. I don't want you to leave me alone at all. I want you to cuddle me. I want you to pet my back, bring me some water, tell me I'm good. Like, I want something very, very different. You know, and if I am going to treat him the way that I want to be treated in those moments, I'm not going to make him feel good. I'm doing this for myself.
Right.
And if he's going to do, you know, I'm going to give you your space, I'm going to be mad. I don't want my space. I want your space right now. You know, and I think that even just understanding things that seem really basic in that kind of way, like really knowing and being willing to say, like, in those moments when we don't know what someone needs and we want to make them feel better, instead of offering all of these other options, to say, you know, what do you need right now? What can I give you? What would you like? You know, like, allowing people to lead is such an important part of really showing that you love someone. And this, again, isn't just something that's confined to relationships, but also deeply in our social movements. Exactly. You know, for communities that you're working in solidarity with, when I'm working in solidarity with trans communities, I'm not going to show up and say, like, I know exactly what y'all need. Let me just take you to the next place. I'm going to say, what do you need and how can I help? And that is really about allowing our egos to dissipate and really allowing other people to have that authority and that agency over their body and over their movements, so that they can, and so that we can really respect that people are always going to know what they need best. You will always know what you need in your body better than anybody else, and I have to trust and respect that, and that's really how we get to a solid pace together.
Yeah, and it's wild how that, you know, it's so simple. Like, it's such a simple, like, question to ask someone, what do you need, or how can I help you, or how can I, you know, get you through this? And so often people really aren't asked that question, you know? You know, I myself, I think I'm guilty of that, of not, you know, of thinking, like, I know what someone needs. Maybe they need this comfort right now. Maybe they need this space, or trying to give people, you know, what I think that they would need, you know, instead of asking. And, you know, it's a really beautiful thing when you ask somebody that and you can see it just melt away, and they're just like, wow, No one's ever asked me that before. Let me tell you all the ways that I need you to help me right now. You know, it's great when that happens.
It's really special.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it can happen in ways like I'm an extrovert. Like we were talking about this just now, that T can be very much like an extrovert, introvert, like needs a lot of quiet, but I'm like on 1,000 most of the time, and that the ways that I need to be cared for and supported are so profoundly different from the ways that people who are introverts need to be like cared for and supported. That love and that way of loving people is so different, and so often we're always encouraging people to be the same, like that we all need to access the same skills or be the same kind of people or be about the same things. But I think really about what it means to have an authentic love is about allowing these things to come out and not conflating them, Even I think about, when people are like fishing for compliments and people will say like, oh, that person is fishing for compliments. I'm like, give it.
So, right. Give them a compliment.
Do you have a shortage of compliments? Because I don't. If someone is looking for affirmation, then why would we not give them that? Why would we not give the people who need that and want that what they need? And then for the people who may not be asking for that, to be able to pull them aside and be like, hey, you good? You need anything?
Exactly.
I got you if you do. That is part of how we know to take care of people in very different ways, and all of it is valuable.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing that for me really unites that desire to be loved, in a way, is this connected need for gender or self-determination or self-determination. This ability for people to be respected for being, they're authors of their own existence, right? And I think that so often we see right now the ways that those things are being threatened so completely, and that people are not understanding why that is so valuable, that gender so often prescribes how we should be as opposed to recognizing how we are. And I think that gender self-determination is about trusting that you know the most about your body. And how could I know more about your body than you? How could I know more about your experience than you? And if I'm going to be there for you as an ally, I have to really trust you.
And I always say that, being queer and trans is about being free. I was talking about this yesterday, how, I love being queer, I love being trans. I absolutely, unequivocally have no desire to be cisgender or to be heterosexual, even though I'm always assumed to be cisgender and heterosexual. I've been in queer community since I was 14 years old. Like, this is really like all I know for most of my life. And, it's giving me the space to be free in my body and in my spirit, and to meet some of the most courageous, most expansive, most brilliant people within this community and within these families that we create. So like that's why like right now what's happening with these fucking bathroom laws and how they are putting my young people in such a detrimental place, because it's bigger than bathrooms, right? This is about like limiting people's freedom, limiting people's freedom to determine who they are and their self-expression. This is about, controlling women's bodies and saying that who can be feminine and who can't, like who can be a woman and who can't, right? It's hurting me deeply. And like I've had a couple organizations, or I'm sorry, I had a couple like publications reach out to me for me to write something. They're like, we need it right now. I'm like, you're gonna have to wait, okay? You're gonna have to wait for me to process this shit. You're gonna have to wait for me to like get through this anger and this grief I'm having before you can force me to put this down so that you can put it on your platform, so you can put it on your website. You know what I'm saying? People have to take a step back to understand, this is more than just like a policy. This is more than a talking point. This is more than another article. This is people's lives. You know what I'm saying? This is people's integrity. So it's deep.
Because I think a part of that love, I think that we often talk about this idea of like self-love and like you should love yourself. And I really struggle with that a lot because, self-love doesn't happen without community love. So you can't just be telling people to love themselves in a vacuum while everything else around them is telling them that they shouldn't exist. So
exactly.
If we are not getting, and so often the people who we're seeing visually represented are of like, of one racial background, of one like particular body type, of one, and I think that we need to see levels of representation that are very diverse, and we need to receive love that is very diverse. And people who are not getting that love deserve it and need it, And I think I love this because the way that this frames, I know he's gay and I don't always understand, but that doesn't change my love for him. That you don't have to understand to respect. Like those things don't have to happen at the same time. And I think sometimes we get caught up at this place of like, I don't understand, I don't get what's going on. But that's really neither here nor there, I was invited to Gallaudet University, which is a deaf university in DC, and I was one of 2 hearing people in the room, and it was a room of deaf folks of color predominantly, talking about the ways, or sorry, like writing about the ways that hearing people have made them feel about themselves. And, you know, there were lots of things I didn't necessarily understand, but for me, it was really important to just bear witness and to really learn how to respect and try to understand what it means for me to leverage my privilege, to shift the axis of power that I am on in order to create more space for other people. And that level of understanding is not something that is, you know, owed to us. We don't we don't deserve that. There are lots of lived experiences that we may never fully understand, but that doesn't mean that we can't completely respect what people need us to do and how people need us to be there for each other. I'm not going to read this whole piece, but I think that, you know, this is important. It's talking about the ways in which that sometimes, like when we get very close to each other, we can feel this level of access and entitlement over each other's bodies. And so this was this woman was asking, was talking about gay men sexism in women's bodies, and talking about, you know, asking all the gay male students in the room to raise their hand if in the past week they touched a woman's body without her consent. And after a little bit of hesitation, you know, most of the room raised their hand up, because so much of, you know, American culture can say, like, queer eye for the straight guy, like this idea that, you know, gay men are allowed to do that because you're not sexually attracted to someone, so it's okay. Or the way that I often see a lot of people touch like trans women without their permission when they're performers, or touching drag queens, or just feeling an access over other people's bodies because of the performative place that you feel that they take on or they exist in. And I think that, again, part of creating a loving space for each other is recognizing we don't have autonomy or agency over other people's bodies. I'm gonna ask people even before I hug them, you know? I'm such a hugger. I wanna hug everybody. But I'm gonna say before I'm in that position, like, are you a hugger? Like, do you want to do that? Because it's substantially easier to find that out before I'm hugging them rather than having someone be in my arms and they don't wanna be there, you know? So understanding that even when we feel so close, we're in a community, we feel connected, that doesn't preclude us from needing to ask when we want to be closer to each other.
Yeah, definitely. And also, you know, talking about like gay male students, we're talking about like white folks, but we also have to understand even those of us who sit at these intersecting experiences does not mean that we are above the criticism. It doesn't mean that we don't engage in these things, right? Like one of my best friends is a cisgender black woman. She's queer, and we have conversations about misogyny and sexism and racism and empowerment and all these things, right? And one day we were at the club, we were at this drag show, and a good, good girlfriend, drag queen friend of mine, Miss Kiki, was performing. She did her thing, whatever. And so we're at the bar, you know, Michelle and I at the bar, and Miss Kiki comes over, and Michelle just goes and like grabs her boob, just like grabs it and like does this whole thing. And I was and you know, I could look at Kiki's face, and she seemed kind of like taken aback from it, but I'm sure she's thinking, you know, because this is another black woman, another black queer woman who I know, you know, she really wasn't sure of how to criticize her or to stop her. So I had to pull Michelle aside, like, girl, you can't, you know, be touching anybody's body, okay? Doesn't matter if we're all queer or trans or black, you know, we have to understand that, you know, we can engage in these things too. And I think, you know, a part of the change, right, and a part of the progress is not only being able to talk about these things and give this analysis when it comes to people who are different from us, or when it comes to people who always have the face of the oppressor, right, but understanding how we can do that too. And that's the hard part of having these really hard, challenging conversations with ourselves and say, oh shit, you know, I've engaged in this type of behavior before, thinking that because I'm at these intersections that, you know, I can't do that. You know, just like, you know, in our relationship, here I am, like, you know, I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm sophisticated, you know, I can't be sexist. And Kim is like, actually you can, and let me show you all the ways that you are. Right? And has really like grown me up, has really like brought me up through really difficult conversations, you know, conversations that was hard for me to have, where I really had to like put my ego aside and, you know, and all this pride aside and this, you know, that I'm so smart and I know so much, and say, you know what, I do engage in this because it is something that is in us, you know, so this is a very important conversation for us to have within ourselves.
And I think that, you know, extending that love is also about, again, extending it across like multiple multiple places of difference. This was like a guy that was created around rebuilding the lives of LGBTI refugees and asylees, and I think right now, politically, we see the way that so many choices that are made from North American governments really impact the lives of people all over the world and have caused, this incredible movement of people. And that, in Canada, we take a lot of refugees on the basis of sexual and gender discrimination. And a couple of years ago, over Pride, we worked on a mural together. So it was about 45 refugees, all newcomers, all who had arrived to Canada within the last 2 months from all over the world. And we were working on this mural together, and it was talking about home and resettlement, and there were things that obviously people shared in terms of their journey and their process. But the one thing that kept striking me the most was that every single experience was profoundly unique. That whether people were coming from Pakistan or Greece or Mozambique, that everyone's experience was so different. Everyone's relationship to home, to their sexuality, to their gender was so profoundly different. And that in order for us to really be able to be there for each other, we really just had to hear each other's stories. We could not at all suppose that there was a standard experience. And I think that that's something that often happens, this idea of normal. That so often gets thrown around, and I think that normal is really a figment of the colonizer's imagination. It's not a thing. People are really uniquely practicing relationships all over the world, and knowing that we are stronger because of that movement, because of that diversity, means that when we are making space for people who are different, means that we really have to allow, again, them to lead and really author their own stories and experiences. Ooh. ¿Por qué? And I think also as part of, communities who are not often in the forefront, I think about communities, especially for people who are able-bodied. I think about disabled communities. I have a lot of people in my life who are wheelchair users, who have different kinds of identified disabilities, that so often their experiences are left out of our communities, that we're not considering what it looks like for us to be creating a loving space that allows disabled communities to define where we occupy spaces and how spaces are public. I think even the ways that people talk about, offline being real life and online being a fake life is really, is part of the privilege of what it means to be able to occupy public space. That so many of the disabled communities I know cannot be in public spaces because buildings are not accessible, because there is no interpreter, because those things are not there. That online is absolutely real life. It's the place where we do so much of our building and so much of our organizing. Do you remember a couple years ago, Ani DeFranco tried to do that thing on a plantation?
Yes, Joe.
Right? So one of the primary people who were able to get that shut down was a young Black trans disabled girl from Toronto, Kylie, who online organized just the shit out of all of it, was constantly there, constantly writing, telling people, getting people together, and all of that happened online. All of that happened online because there is not really spaces that are completely accessible for this person. So really checking ourselves on the ways that even our language can exclude people from feeling present in our community, and part of the ways that that prevents people from getting access to the love that we all need.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, especially thinking about that in the ways that it extends to deaf communities don't often identify as being disabled, and deaf is a cultural experience that often we don't get to be a part of that. When I was at Gallaudet, I did a presentation that was kind of similar to this, and it took 9 interpreters working over hours to come up with the signs to talk about what I was trying to share, because there were no frames of reference for that. And that is such a tragedy, that we are communicating in completely different ways, and we are just not present with so much of the people who are in our community because of these barriers. We have to want more for each other. We have to ask, why are these people not here, and what are we doing that is making it inaccessible for them to be with us? And I think when we think about, visibility and access, that so often it's the people who are visible who people think most about, and I think about the ways that the Muslim ban is really affecting so many people, but we don't even know the extent that it's affecting the LGBT community, because that visibility is something that is very tenuous and complicated. And I often say, that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. That just because we don't see the evidence of a specific community and they're not visually organizing themselves themselves in a particular way does not mean that they're not real, does not mean that they're not there, does not mean that we do not have to think about them and think about what it means to create safe and meaningful spaces for all of us to be in.
Yeah, definitely. Come on, baby. Yeah, so this is a photo of a young lady named Balpreet. And a couple years ago, she was in line at the airport. And, you know, some asshat took a picture of her. Just sidebar, don't take pictures of people without their consent. You know, we all have, you know, most of us have smartphones and we have access to take pictures. Don't take pictures of people because you like the outfit or because you don't like the outfit, to make fun of their bodies or to give them a compliment. Do not take pictures of people without their consent. I have a friend of mine that does this shit all the time, gets on my nerves, tell him every day. Anyway. So she was in line at the airport waiting for her flight, and this guy takes a picture of her and posted on Reddit and was like, "Oh my God, what's going on?
If you have ever been on Reddit, you know, like Reddit does a lot.
Reddit is a particular slice of hell, right?" Okay, my God, you know, and so the photo goes viral. And so her response was basically like, you know, I'm a Sikh woman, and, you know, a part of being Sikh is that, you know, we don't, you know, make any adjustments to our body. So you know, this is how the hair grows on my body. This is me in my natural state, you know. And
this is how the Creator made me.
This is how
I'm going to be here in this world.
Right. This is how I'm going to be here in this world, in my natural state, in my natural womanhood, you know, and was really making a clear statement about how we are, you know, placing limitations on how people can be, how we are not taking into account people's spirituality and their presence, not taking into account, you know, how people want to live in this world. You know, it was something that really moved me a lot, you know, and once her story came out, it really like clicked for a lot of people that we have to, you know, start to ask questions before we start to make assumptions about people, and meeting people where they are and loving them as they are, you know, who you are in your naturalness or not, you know, because being natural doesn't necessarily mean being more valuable than other people. I hate that kind of argument, you know what I'm saying, that, you know, particularly when it comes to women, like, oh, the best kind of woman is one that's natural or doesn't wear any makeup, or, you know, all of these things. And it's like, you know, we have to create, particularly for me as a man and as a masculine person, it's important for me to understand these things and know that I am a part of the problem. No matter how queer and trans I am, no matter how much of this work that I do, just by proxy of who I am a part of the problem, and I have to work to get through it, right? And to understand that it's important for us to make space for women and femme folks to exist as they are, you know, in accordance to what they want.
And I think that that's a big part of queerness, of that this person
Yeah.
doesn't identify as queer or gender
Right.
nonconforming, even though I know a lot of queer women who got full beards, beautiful, lush beards, you know? And I think that for me, it's my queerness that like really allows me, again, to treat people the way that they want to be treated, to not make that assumption, and to respect you by virtue of how you show up, and not make decisions about the character of your personhood solely by an evaluation I'm making on your physical appearance. So this experience of being soft on the person and hard on the issues, and what that looks like, and what this experience of intersectionality is, you know? And Kimberly Crenshaw, you know, is like the godmother of intersectionality. She's really given us that term to work with. And what it really, you know, is about is very much what I was saying before, this experience of not being fractions but being layers. Right. That these things are all happening at the same time, and that these aren't just, you know, racial experiences that we're talking about. We're not just talking about the abstract of sexism. We're talking about how it plays out in people's bodies, that people are living these realities on a day-to-day basis, and that we can't just speak about it in a siloed way, that these things are very, very complex. And I think, you know, we talk about this in our relationship a lot, you know, that we are very, you know, we are intersectional by virtue of the people that we are as queer folks of color, you know, and we think about that when it comes to safety. So Teak will always, you know, in the street, if I'm experiencing street harassment, which often happens, like as a woman, that he will always be a person who steps in and you know, works to like deflect those things and keep me safe, you know. But at the same time, for someone who is a transgender man, we talk about what that would look like, you know, when prison is a possibility. You know, if we've been stopped by the police, and in that case, where I'm going to be the one to run interference, because I'm not going to ever let him get locked up, because that becomes an increasingly unsafe space for a transgender man to be in, to end up in that kind of system, and then have them determine like where he would go. And we're not doing that, you know. So for us, that intersectional experience means that we have to talk about what that looks like where I'm more vulnerable and where he steps in more, and then where he's more vulnerable and where I need to step in more.
And we're really intentional about having these conversations all the time, even though it's hard. And I think, again, I think being queer and trans does set us free. But I think if you are not queer or trans, that you also can attain that freedom by being open and having this open lines of communication and being intentional about what people need in terms of their safety, right? Being intentional what people need in terms of being healthy and being comfortable. And sometimes it's hard, particularly, going back to this idea is, as a masculine person, as a man, and having subconsciously, having internalized these ideas around sexism and misogyny of, being able to check when, maybe she's experiencing street harassment. I'll tell the story that I told yesterday. So one day, Kim and I were on the train, and we were on our way to have a fab date. It was a beautiful day out. We were on the train in New York City, and as we're going off the train, this guy leans in and says something to her, right? And I didn't know what he said, but I noticed that Kim's whole attitude or had changed, right? So she kind of got an attitude, so now I'm oh, what the fuck is wrong with you? You about to have a good time, what's up? And she's like, he said to me, I want to stick my dick in it, right? And so for the rest of the day, so I'm like, okay, that's terrible. And in my mind, I'm thinking it's terrible, and I just put it away. An hour or two later, she's still upset, right? It changed the trajectory and the mood of what we were doing, and I found myself being angry at her for being angry at what happened and for not letting it go, right? And I really had to step back and be like, yo, I'm really shitty for this, right? And we had to have a lot of conversations about that. And that was hard. That was really, really hard. But it was a learning moment for me. It was a teachable moment, and I think you did have to do a lot of emotional labor around that, and oftentimes women and femme folks do have to do a lot of emotional labor, Women and femme folks are constantly upgrading us as masculine people, in our lives and in how we're thinking about being more open about our own vulnerabilities and on our own privileges, But this was, for me, it was such a pivotal moment for me because it taught me so much, and it taught me how important it was for us to communicate, and it taught me that, even though I am in this queer, black, trans body, that I still sit at seats of privilege and of safety that my wife does not, and I have to be cognizant of that.
And I think, the privilege often that comes from being part of a different group means that you're not presently aware of that.
Right.
That I walk through the street on a regular basis, and there's lots of times where Teak doesn't see the look that I'm getting, or someone might grab me, or someone else might whisper something. I'm fielding those things, but because that's just not in his purview, he's not seeing it, and I'm absorbing all of that in my body, and then I'm expected constantly by everybody to just not be in it, not be affected by it, but constantly being told these things. Or I remember there was once where he asked me to go to the store, and I got really frustrated with him. We were in the Bronx. He was like, just go to the Walgreens and pick this thing up. And I was really upset. And he was like, why are you taking an attitude? Why can't you do this? And I was like, going to the Walgreens is going to take me 30 minutes because I'm going to get harassed by 5 guys on the way there, and I'm going to get called a cunt at least 4 times, and I don't want to do that, So if you want to go to the store, I will go to the store with you, but I'm not doing this by myself because of what this means for me, And trying to explain what that looks like and what that feels like is something that's very complex and layered, but it is, it is about thinking how can, I think we've said this before, that, your allyship card expires at the end of the day every day.
Right.
So, you got to renew that thing first thing in the morning. And I'm not taking a break from what it means for me to be in my body, so you can't take a break either. Right. That our solidarity has to be like that. We have to be there with each other, and we have to be looking out for those things happening. For the people in my life I know who are disabled and who take them a lot longer to walk home, I will be on the phone with them while they're walking home late at night for however many hours it takes, just to make sure that I can be there and they can be safe. It is about making these accommodations and these extensions for people in a world that is perpetually safe to so many of us, but being able to recognize when we have whatever privilege that is, to be able to give that to other people so that they can have more safety.
Yeah. I do all the store runs now. All of them.
And I think, as part of this understanding of intersectionality, I love Audre Lorde. I have so much of her tattooed across my body. That there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives, And I think she gives us a lot of really beautiful blueprints for us to move from, in knowing that, again, that these things are happening in very complex and complicated ways. That there are some places where it is less safe for teak, and I am the safer one as the cisgender person, as the female person. Those things happen, and that's why it does have to be an engaged dialogue.
Yeah.
We have to talk about what safety looks like, because we can never know. We don't live in each other's bodies, so we always have to ask. We talked about this again, Teak talked about this yesterday, we bring this up a lot, but this experience of being an ally is not an identity, it's a process, that we are going to inevitably make so many mistakes in this process, We're in a learning space, we're in an institution, and you can get a master's degree, that's a thing, right? But this is not something you will ever master.
Right.
This is really deeply about humility and learning and unlearning and listening, and it really varies from person to person. The different people will have very different needs, like Teek's mom, who was like, I want to be myself, stop being all with me, versus someone who's like, I need more support, I need more of this. And it is really about allowing ourselves to learn those things and have that be evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a process that we have to be involved in every single day, and not be so quick to pat ourselves on the back because we had a good day in allyship, And I think that word allies gets thrown around a little bit too much. I think it's kind of lost its luster, it's kind of lost its authenticity, because people think just because, they are good to people who are different from them, then that makes them an authentic ally. But it's like, what are you doing, to leverage your privilege for other people? When have you just sat down, shut up, and listened? When did you just listen with the intent of taking it in and thinking about it instead of listening just to have a retort, right? And we often do that and don't even understand that. So it's a process that we have to be constantly engaged in and be enthusiastically engaged in, being criticized or, being put in the place where you really have to have some self-reflection and check yourself. That's hard, but it's like we have to train ourselves to get to the point where we want that. As hard as it is, as bad as it sometimes might feel, we have to welcome it and say, okay, challenge me. Tell me how I can be a better person. Tell me how I can be a better ally. Tell me how I've been a shitty person. Whether it's in my race or in my gender or, how has my privilege harmed you, and be able to take that and work through it.
And actually to be able to, apologize for what you did and not how the other person feels.
Exactly.
Don't do that. That's so messy when people be like, I'm sorry for the way you feel. No, you want to be sorry for what you did, for your actions, Intent and impact are very different things.
Exactly.
And you may have the most beautiful intention in the world, but the impact may not be that. And so it's important to be accountable for the impact.
Right.
If I step on Teek's foot, I'm not going to spend the next 10 minutes being like, I'm usually so graceful. I never step on people's feet. I'm a yoga teacher, And when people be doing that thing around well, I have a black friend and I love black people and and it's like, girl, it's okay to be wrong and to say I'm sorry for what I did. Let me know how I can do better and be better for you, because that wasn't my intention, but I'm sorry for how I hurt you, and let me attend to your injury.
Right.
We often take physical injuries as being more serious than emotional injuries, but emotional injuries are ones that often, because we can't see, we don't know how to heal them. Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to at least begin from a place of saying, I'm sorry for what I did, so that someone can begin that work of actually being able to heal from it.
Yeah. And honor that conflict and that challenge, because at seats of conflict comes great opportunity, right? Comes the change. So when that conflict comes, be able to take it in and be like, yeah, this is an opportunity for me to grow and be better.
Mm-hmm. And then that allyship, that means that we fight for women of all colors, fight for trans women, for women of every class, not just white, middle class, cisgender women. We all need to back each other up and fight for equal treatment, or equity, I think, more aptly. Mm-hmm. And I think that, that for me is really deeply important. It's about extending that fight and respecting that agency and letting people who are of those communities lead that work in the ways that we fight for that freedom. And I think as a part of that is really importantly remembering that, stop telling people to be patient. Stop telling people to wait, I can't pay my bills with, the freedom that's going to come in 20 years, Right. I can't live my life with something that you're telling me is going to happen possibly not in my lifetime. Patience is not a political strategy. It does not work. It never has. There was actually a study that was recently done. It was published in the American Political Science Review, the largest study of its kind. It extends over every continental mental mass in the world goes back about 40 years. And this study was trying to determine what is the most valuable way of creating change, specifically for women and children. And the thing that they found, the thing that is most valuable, is not the number of women politicians, is not access to money or jobs, but is actually grassroots social movements. Activists, often young people, on the ground, creating, agitating, making change, are the ones who are making that difference. And it's never ones who are being patient and waiting for it, but it's people who are creating that space and taking it up and doing that important work, you know? So if we know that it works, it does work, even when it is 5 steps forward and 4 steps back, it is always what pushes this change. And so we have to really understand that even when something is not urgent for you, that must mean that it is not something that is deeply a part of your community. And we cannot judge other people's desire to move forward when it's so much about their lives. So, Love Like an R&B Song. I think for us, we were just so like...
a 90s R&B song. 90s R&B song.
Because, you know, like R&B songs these days are a little bit like disappointing sometimes.
A little
You're
bit,
like, I
a little
don't
bit.
want to be loved like that. You know? But I think for us, it was also about, you know, R&B songs for us were like a place that we learned a lot about love, but we often didn't see representations of like queer and brown love, you know? That was really an absent thing for us. And so for us, again, loving each other out loud was really about creating that visibility where we had never seen it before.
Yeah, being a model of possibility, you know, because oftentimes, you know, queerness is antithetical to blackness, right? We're talking about LGBT people or black people, but it's like we exist here. You know, that's why another reason it was so important for us to live our lives out loud and to show this love, to show that we do exist, that black queer love exists in this world, and it can be something that's really profound. I love this.
I know you do love it so much.
I really do.
And I think when we start getting into love, you know, I think we can talk about all of these different strategies. English is not my first language, and I often struggle with the way that we have the same word for love for everything. You know, like I love my shoes, I love my husband. Like I don't love those things in the same way, even though I really love my shoes, you know? But, you know, finding ways to unpack what that means, and I really love this, and I feel like when you ask, like, especially little kids, they're just so clear about what love is, you know? Like,
what's your favorite one on here, baby?
I think my favorite is love is when you tell a guy you like his shirt and he wears it every day.
Yeah. My favorite one is love is what's in the room with you at Christmas if you stop opening the presents and listen. Isn't that beautiful?
And I just feel like, again, like for me, the intergenerational need for like children in our community is part of what connects us to this really like vulnerable, palpable part of what love is, you know? Like, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What does it taste like? I feel like they know that in a way because they haven't allowed themselves to be closed off to what love means. And I think that we need that. We need those things informing the ways that we work with each other and the way that we love each other so we can, you know, like that is some of the sweetest parts of the ways that we exist in this world. Thank you, baby. Here you go. Renewing your commitment to each other, you know, and this is for me like what allyship looks like in action, or what strategies for solidarity really look like. That we do have to renew that commitment, that promise, that relationship to each other on a daily basis. You can't just, I may have loved you yesterday, but I got to figure out what it means to love you today, you know, and that's a very different thing to do. And I think, again, it is about really listening to each other, but most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. I'm so guilty of this. We would be fighting, and he would be saying something, and I'm just like, oh, I'm so waiting until you're done, because I'm about to tell you about yourself. You know, and I really had to stop, and actually, when he would talk, like, I now literally have to just, like, take notes.
Yeah,
like, just be really present and just listen to what he's saying, and not, like, maybe write down, like, what I want to talk about eventually, but, like, really just listen to him so I'm not just doing that.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, you know, we love each other deeply, but don't think it's perfect. You know what I'm saying? Don't think that it is not without conflict. It's not without tears. It's not without screaming matches. It happens. But to love each other so intensely, right, means that we have to be better about, we have to fight right. We have to fight good. You know what I'm saying? And that was happening to the both of us. Like, she'd be talking, I'm just like, okay. I'd hear one thing, and I'd be ready to jump on that. And hear nothing else she said, and I'm going to jump on that because, you know, you were wrong. Let me tell you why.
And that's that one place, and we, you know, often the way that we've learned to be in relationship to each other is to seek power over one another.
Right.
You know, like you don't want to be the one who loves someone more. Like you don't want to be the one that was more wrong. You don't want to be all those things. And so you're looking for an opportunity to be like, oh, I got that. Now I am the righter one here, or I am the more powerful
I'm the righter one.
here. Because that is, you know, that's so much of what we learn to relate to each other in these like power dynamics. But, you know, loving each other is really about working to equalize that power dynamic. So it isn't about saying that I'm more or greater or better, but recognizing that, you know, we're not on opposite sides of the table. We're on the same side of the table, and the problem is on the other side.
Right. And we really had to like employ strategies for us to recommit our love and our lives to each other every day, to keep it high, to keep this energy up. So we literally have a notebook, right? And if we are about to have an argument, she pulls out her notebook, I pull out mine, and it's like, okay, you go. I won't say a word. I'm listening, and I'm writing down things that I want to speak back to. And then when she's done talking, she says, I'm done. And then I talk. And that might mean she might be talking for 30 or 45 minutes, you know? It's seriously. Yeah, but it is what it is. And I'm just writing notes, you know? But it has helped, and this is a strategy that we've had to employ within our interpersonal relationships, right? But we also have to think about the strategies that we have to employ to keep the energy and the love high within our politics, within our social movements, in our communities, you know, in campus, in class, you know, within our friendships. You know, we have to employ strategies to keep the love and the energy up.
Because we have to be able to have hard conversations to get to a more rewarding place. Not everything is going to be easy, and not everything is going to be soft, and we have to still like be able to be with each other at the end of that, you know? We talk about this a lot. The whole point of a relationship is to set your partner free. You know, I want Teak to feel the freest. You know, so much of the world is about really restraining who he can be and how he can be. And with each other, this should be the place where we feel most able to be our authentic selves. And if that's not happening, then we're not good for each other, you know? And I think that in our social movements and our communities, we also have to think about what that looks like too. How free are we allowing each other to be? And I think about this, you know, also in the ways that we connect with people, again, who are like chronically ill, people who are disabled, that again, so often there is this expectation when we're participating in these movements of either like be better or leave, like be better or don't be here. But what does it look like to be able to, again, like take people with us, to meet people where they're at, to understand not everyone's communicating in the same way, not everyone has the same needs, people who have ADHD, people who are dealing with depression, who are bipolar. There are so many other layers for what it means for us to be with each other in community, so we can't, again, assume that there is this one standard, but rather an understanding that it's deeper than that. Definitely. Community care and self-care. So again, Audre Lorde, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Right. You know, so I do a lot of retreats for femmes of color and indigenous femmes, and you know, we're talking about things like racism and sexism and imperialism, but like, you know, we're doing it in like our underwear, like, and we're doing yoga, or we're like laying out and drinking water, or doing it by the water, you know, like you can have really vibrant organizing spaces, but they can also really honor people's bodies. They can really honor where people are at. You don't have to be at like a terribly uncomfortable meeting desk in order to get things done. There are other ways of us being able to build with each other. And I always recommend people, like, we have to build the care into the work as opposed to prescribing self-care as another shift that happens after the work. Because then it's all this other work I gotta do. So I gotta be like, I gotta get 8 hours of sleep, I gotta do all my homework, I gotta do this, and then I gotta take care of myself. Like, yo, that's not fair. That's like a double shift of work, you know? We need to build that into what is happening so that we're not being belabored in a whole other way.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things, I've learned so much from you, but one of my favorite things that I've learned from you is a no to you is a yes to me. You know, and too often people don't say no enough to other people and say yes to themselves as a way of taking care of themselves. Oh yeah, no might make them angry, but it will make you free, right? And that's something that I really hold with me, you know, because I'm so good for saying yes to everything, particularly doing this work. You know, people, it's demanding. You know, it's a lot of work, and sometimes you have to just say no to take care of yourself. Like before I was here, I was giving a talk at Harvard, and you know, I spoke to a room of people. I spoke for like 2 hours, you know, and it's draining. You know, it's a lot of energy. 3:30, and then right after that, they were having the Black History Month Fellowship dinner, and they really wanted me to attend this dinner, and it was another 2 hours of like holding court and talking to people, and I was like, I love y'all. I love all the Black people here at Harvard. Y'all are great, but I really can't come. I'm dying right now. Like, I need to take care of myself because I have to continue to have my energy up to give this to other people, you know? And it was just so refreshing when I said that to my folks over there. They were like, we get it. Like, we understand that, you know, thank you for being so open and honest with us and saying yes to yourself so that you could preserve yourself, so you can continue doing what you're doing. You know, so, you know, don't be afraid to say no. No is a
And also
lovely
to
word.
support people in their no's.
Yeah.
You know, I had a really good friend of mine. I remember the first time I heard someone just say no, and we were all going out like after. It was like we had like an exam. Everyone was super tired, but we're like, oh, let's all go to the bar. We're gonna have a great time. And my friend just looked at everyone and she was like, I don't want to go. I'm not going. And we were all like, what do you mean? Why aren't you going? Come on, it'll be so fun, it'll be so great. And she's like, why are y'all gonna peer pressure me why are you gonna peer pressure me into this? Like, I don't want to. And for me, it was just this light bulb moment that so often when people say no, we try to coerce them out of it. We try to get them to give us the yes. And she was just gonna go home and Netflix and chill by herself. Like, she didn't need to account to us what she was doing or why she was doing, but her no should be enough for me to say, like, good for you. Say no. Do whatever you want to do. I'll see you another time, you know? And realizing that no is a privilege so often denied to so many of us. For women,
Particularly women.
for queer folks, we're so often not allowed the space to have that no. And a big part of allyship is supporting people and enforcing those boundaries so that we can continue to preserve ourselves to be in this work. So we can continue to preserve ourselves to exist.
Right.
You know, it doesn't even have to be about giving ourselves to other people, but we have to be able to allow people to say no and hold their ground so that we can stay whole. Thanks, Lev. And I think, you know, if we're gonna allow people to have this space, like, I love me because of my amazing ability to keep going and keep being positive after constantly being told I don't belong, that, you know, it is part of the ways that we support those folks in having really strong boundaries so that they can keep going, you know? That I've seen, again, so many women and elders in this movement who we lose so young, like in 40s and 50s and 60s, when it's just because they've poured themselves into the world. And it's like, we can't light ourselves on fire to keep other people warm. And we can't be a part of supporting that because that isn't love and that isn't justice. It has to be something that where we honor each other and we position it as, you know, maybe we are putting each other's lives to help each other. You know, maybe it isn't, like Teague mentioned this a little bit when he was talking about this idea of, like, you know, the kind of, we often have to think about, like, what kind of labor we're bringing to this world because capitalism, right? But at the same time, we also need to ask ourselves, like, what kind of person do you want to be? Like, what does integrity look like for you? Like, do you like yourself? And what does that mean? Like, what are the qualities of the person that you are that you want to be, and how do you want to bring that to other people? And this doesn't have a lot to do with the way that success is traditionally defined. It really is about what it looks like for us to love, to heal. You know, I say this a lot, that the grass is greenest where we water it, where we nurture. And if we're not giving that nurturing and we're constantly asking for an outpouring, so often from the most marginalized and vulnerable ones are the ones who have to educate the most and sustain the most and then still show up and be really happy in giving. Like, that's unfair. And that balance really has to look like keeping those boundaries strong and firm for people and thinking about what it looks like to extend that care.
Absolutely.
We said, you know, that this way of, like, this idea of, like, self-love is a daily fight. You know, that it isn't something that comes easy, and it isn't something that is just natural, because, again, so much of this world is about tearing people down for their difference. And if we know that it is a really difficult fight, you know, we want to affirm and celebrate people who are very vulnerable. We want to, you know, like, again, I'm a complimenter in general, but I'm like, I appreciate my Instagram timeline is so lit because it's so different. There's just so many people from different backgrounds and different walks of life, and I'm like the first person to be like, I love your hair, I love your belly, I love your crown, I love what you are doing, I love the ways that you are choosing to record yourself in a time that you love yourself the most, you know, that if we want to be there for each other, we have to recognize that every time we communicate with each other, we have the ability to make each other more or less possible. And what choice are you going to make with that? You know, why would we not always choose to give each other that ability to keep going as opposed to take it away?
So, Kim often says this, that we have to be careful with each other so that we can be dangerous together, right? And this goes back to this idea of being soft on the person and hard on the issues, right? We constantly have to be in communications of care with one another so that we can continue to fight this good fight, so that we can continue to try to be agents of change, right? It doesn't happen unless we are moving together. And I think that's a part of our interpersonal relationships, but we also have to take that and apply that to our families. We have to take that and apply that to our friends and to our community, and to how we are living our lives every day. We have to be, good and gentle and compassionate with each other. And too often, people don't understand, kindness and compassion is something that is so important when it comes to how we are relating to different people.
And we can be harshest to the people who are closest
Exactly.
to us
Yeah.
because of that sheer proximity.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah. So, you want to zoom in for this one?
Oh, yeah.
Does it zoom in?
No, no, it
Oh, it doesn't. Okay.
But
forget
we were framing this as that ability to practice that love again is so often threatened from something that is coming from the outside,
Yeah.
And that Janet and Laverne have talked a lot about this.
Yeah, this is a picture of Janet Mock and her husband Aaron, and Janet and Laverne, great friends of ours, we love very much, have often talked about how there isn't space for men who are with or are attracted to trans women, to trans women, to show this to show love and to show affection and to even be open and honest about the person that they are without having their manhood or their sexuality called into question in a way that is violent, right? Where they aren't given space to be in queer community and they're not given space to be in straight community, and it leaves folks isolated. And so then when we think about that isolation and you couple that with the fragility of masculinity and how that fragility of masculinity becomes violent, this is why trans women are mostly killed and are violated by their partners,
People who say that they'll love them the most.
And statistically, when we're talking about hate crimes, LGBT hate crimes overwhelmingly is happening to transgender women of color, right? It's happening to all kinds of folks, but overwhelmingly, I think it's 70% of LGBT hate crimes are crimes against trans women of color, and a lot of that is coming from the men in their lives.
So for us, this really does mean that the most vulnerable folks among us really have some of the greatest knowledge on what it looks like to love in a way that's authentic, to love in a way that's meaningful, to love in a way that's really for the long haul, And examples for me like this of love in action are so important. This low-income apartment complex for LGBT seniors in Philly, that, for me, is what love looks like in action. It looks like caring for our elders as they age so that they don't have to go back in the closet, so that we are building communities and we're not leaving people behind.
Yeah.
It looks like that kind of really important care that is just as much about activism as it is about love. That so often the people who are really privileged are also the ones who are the most hopeless. It's the people who have been imagining outside of these institutions this whole time that are coming up with the most nuanced ways of creating something different. The only thing that we do know for sure is that things will keep changing. Even this time that we spend here with each other, we're all the different for it. Everything that happens makes us different. So we know that change is ultimately inevitable, but we really have to be the ones to steer that change in a way so that we are on the right side of the future.
That's perfect.
So this endless possibility of love, I'm going to go through this kind of quick as we are at the end.
We're at the end.
For us, I think that it's important for us to really affirm our community and our culture, not as counterculture, not as a subculture, but as our culture.
Right.
I don't agree with this idea of mainstream anything. There's corporate media, there's social media, there's different kinds of media, but it's not my mainstream if I'm not subscribing to it.
Right.
And so the culture that we're in, that we have been raised in,
Yeah.
is our mainstream, and that is really for us where we get this possibility of love, that our identities, as much as they are places where we are marginalized, these are the identities that give us the ability to be who we are. It's what makes us strong, resilient, proud, brave. All of those things come from the people that we are, the identities that we have. And when we get to tap into those things, again, we get to come up with the most innovative solutions for connecting each other. This app is amazing, and it's an app for everyone that's gender neutral, a gender neutral dating app, because, Tinder is a mess sometimes.
Right.
And I think that whenever we allow those, the beautiful uniqueness of our personalities to be nourished and flourish, we get to come up with things that really, again, meet us where we are at.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we talked a little bit about what it means to have possibility models, you know, of just, you know, like Laverne as like, still, even as a friend of mine, is still someone who I look to as just like, thank you for existing. Thank you for taking up the space that you do. Thank you for just being so beautiful and vibrant in it and just making me feel like we deserve more than we're always told that we should accept.
Absolutely.
You know? And I think that we can look to other communities as examples of this. This was a Native American tribe that, you know, had legalized same-sex marriage before it was legalized legalized in the U.S. You know, that so often we look to these like traditional spaces for the answers that will set us free, as opposed to looking to each other. Like each person in their own communities has so much valuable knowledge that we need as well. So we can be institutionally educated. That's so valuable. But we also need to be community educated. We also need to learn from each other, from these other stories, so that we can build something that is more meaningful and more inclusive.
So not queer like gay, queer like escaping definition, queer like some sort of fluidity and limitlessness at once, queer like a freedom too strange to be conquered, queer like the fearlessness to imagine what love can look like and pursue it. This is from Ottawa-based poet Brandon Wint, who's identified as a black straight man. I love this. I used this in my presentation yesterday. We use this constantly because I think it really just encapsulates what it means to be queer and the freedom that we have. And queerness is for me is a culture, right? And I think it's something. And queerness is also it's a culture that goes beyond people's sexuality, and it goes beyond who you prefer, but it's about engaging in a freedom in your body, engaging in a freedom in your fluidity, and being open to being fluid, however you would define that. Being able to step away from these rigid ideas of who you're supposed to be in your body, in your gendered body, in your racialized body, and really starting to harness what it means to you, and really starting to create a humanity that's tethered to your spirit instead of what other people say.
I love them.
Yeah. So this is real quick because we're about to finish up. But this is a beautiful gay black couple. They have 3 children together. They live together. They love together. They're amazing parents. Their Instagram is amazing. Watching them do their little girl's hair and just hanging out with their kids is a beautiful thing to see. And it's just a model of possibility of what like black queer love and black queer families can look like. Like we do exist and we do thrive and we do love each other. Yeah.
Up here. There's a link to the places you can find us and to find access to the other kind of content. This is a Prezi, it's public, it's shareable, it's free, it has your name on it, so you can totally take a look at it much after this time is over. I think for us, what we really just want to leave you with is, again, like that love is so deeply valuable to the work that we do personally and politically, but there really can be no love without justice. So we need both of those things in the ways that we work together and build communities together.
Right. And also, let me just say one more thing. Thank you so much for the announcement that happened today. And before my talk, you gave the announcement saying that everybody here is safe. No matter what your gender identity is, you can use whatever restroom and facilities feel good to you. So it doesn't matter if this federal government is trying to shut us down and is trying to limit us and is trying to teach us that we're not human. All of us in this room have a way of creating that space for people that we love, right? So I'm so happy that Brown is doing that, and I implore all of you to do that in your workplaces, at your churches, or in your classrooms, just standing up and saying, I am here, I'm your ally, I'm gonna make sure that you're safe, I'm gonna make sure you have the space to be to do what all other human beings can do, which is just go to the bathroom and leave themselves or whatever it is. But I thank you so much for that, and I want us all to be able to practice that. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to be taking some questions from the audience, so raise your hand and I'll come to you.
I also can collect index cards if you prefer to write your questions down. And if you have evals, you can leave them in the blue bucket way up.
Questions?
And we ask that you use the mic. So you talked a lot about being soft on the person and hard on the issue. Could you say a little bit more about what it means to navigate the space between, so one, recognizing that sometimes we can operate from a place of trauma, and our trauma puts us in triggered states where we're not able to address any of it, the issue, the person, nothing, which can result in treating people as if they're disposable. So when it comes to specifically the Black community in a time where we need to love on one another, can you talk about navigating that line between compassion and accountability, and when you feel this need to dispose of someone?
I think that, I've said this before, that, if you don't like me and I don't like you, that's not a problem. That's consensus, So it's okay when we don't like each other and we don't want to work together. Everyone deserves community, but we don't have to be in the same community. And so I do think that there is absolutely times when we can say that we don't believe that our community building, our organizing, our coalition building needs to happen with each other. Sometimes there can be sustained experiences of violence between people that don't feel good to navigate, and I think that it's okay to say that. But even though I might not want to be besties with someone, I'm still gonna fight for their right to exist. So those for me are very, very separate things. I'm still gonna fight for your space and community. I'm still gonna fight for your rights, your access, your human rights. Those things are inalienable for me, that I'm not gonna compromise on that. I'm not gonna mess up your pronoun because I don't like you. And I think for me, that's part of it, of being able to say that I'm gonna still believe in those values that for me are core and intrinsic to the work that I'm doing, even when we might not be able to hold space. It's okay. Sometimes fights can be messy and terrible, and that's all right. I don't think that there's this way of being evolved past sometimes just being I want to talk to you, I'm over this, All of those things are real and honest and genuine, and at the same time, that doesn't mean that I'm throwing you under the bus. That doesn't mean that I'm abandoning your space in this world, I think that those things can be very separate.
Are there any other questions?
Hi, thank you. That was a really, really good talk. I wanted to ask, because you started the talk, I can't remember your exact words, but you said something like 20 years of anger, or you said you've been, I can't remember the exact words, but you talked a lot in your presentation about love. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how anger versus love motivates you, and how they motivate you.
For sure. Do you want to, or do you want? Here, baby.
I don't know. I think oftentimes anger can be the motivation, but love kind of has to be the solution. You know what I'm saying? We get to these places where we're so hurt by what's happening in this world, and we're so angry and we're so frustrated, but we can't combat that with anger and frustration, right? We have to have a radical idea of love. Love extinguishes those fires of anger, right? Love extinguishes those fires of frustration. So those things, they happen on the same spectrum, but we have to. For me, it's important for me to engage in love when I'm feeling really angry, and that's not easy. You know what I'm saying? It has to something that's deliberate, something that's intentional. I meditate. I try to meditate every morning. I really, really do, because I am angry. And I think as a Black trans man, I have every right to be angry. I'm angry all the fucking time. I'm walking down the street and I'm mad. I come home and I'm like, you know what? These white people get on my nerves. I'm mad. Okay, cis men are trash. I'm mad. I'm mad every day. But I have to take quiet space for myself and start to think about how I can employ love in that place, and fill myself up with love, and start to see how that love can start to overtake the anger that happens for me.
And I think anger for me keeps me present in, again, there's lots of very real, I'm angry and there are reasons. There are very real reasons for me to be angry, and the taking stock of those things for me, again, motivates me to be pouring the love that I have into the places that really need it, So if I am so angry about the ways that, this ban is happening, I'm thinking about, how can I give more money to trans organizing? How can I pour some of the love that I have into a place that is going to be defeating the things that are making me angry? And I think it is about, trying to fill up the glasses of people who are doing this work, who are sustaining this, and trying to make sure that they are also good, that we know that, again, relative experiences of privilege that people have, and whatever access to privilege I have, I have to leverage that in some way, even when I'm really, really angry. But definitely, I'm a yoga teacher, so for me, again, a lot of my anger gets worked out on the mat. And I think there's a lot of and as an artist, you know, like there's a lot of my anger that gets out into my art, and I think that it's important to feel your feelings so that you have space to feel something else. And I think if you don't feel all your feelings, it's just gonna live in, like, I think anger lives in different parts of everyone's body. Some people hold it in their jaw, some people hold it in their hips, some people hold it in their stomach. I'm a stomach person for sure, you know, and like I think that it can be easy to just allow it to sit in those parts of our body and not address the way that it's hurting us, you know. But again, I'm like, you gotta feel it out to get to another place where we can feel something different.
Hey, Kim. So I really love how outward you are about your femness, because I perceive femme people to be everything. But so I'm just curious as to how you cultivate femme spaces that are inherently queer. I think as a femme woman, especially as a queer femme woman, I often see the ways in which my friends, my straight friends, are really not in community with me at all in any arena, especially when it comes to queerness. So I'm curious as to how you do that in your femme spaces, whether you put the energy in to do that, and how would you go about even starting that conversation, especially coming from a place with compassion, when really all I feel is anger.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I really love being femme. I actually have tattooed on my chest that says Femme Bruja as a reminder to me that the places, thank you, that the places that I'm so often told not to trust are my femness and my magic. And I know that I often put my hand on this part of me when I'm trying to like center myself. So it's a reminder that it's like my femness and my magic are like absolutely my best guides. You know, so I really trust my femininity, and that has been a really hard process because people are always telling me that femininity is superficial and it's frivolous and it's not valuable, and I'm constantly defending that right in so many different capacities. And as a speaker even, you know, that's why I speak in like, you know, a push-up bra and tights and like like I'm trying to make it very clear that yes, I'm wearing eyeliner and I'm talking about imperialism, and those things are not counter to each other. They're happening at the same time, you know? So my feminist is a really deep part of my activism that I really connect to a lot. And I think, you know, in LA, there's the LA Femmes of Color Collective. They're one of my favorite femme organizing spaces like in the country. I love them so much. And I've gotten to like meet with them and like do workshops with them and spend time with them a lot. And what I love about that space is that it is so queer, so trans, so of color, so indigenous, and just really in so many different ways, like meeting people where they're at. Like one of the last times we had like a workshop session, we all got together and just like did each other's like makeup. Like we just did it, and we talked about the ways that our femme identity gets challenged in the world and how we can be more supportive to each other. You know, it was like so liberating to be in those kinds of spaces. Or, you know, we did a workshop the next day that was about like entrepreneurial organizing for femmes, like how femmes hustle, you know, like that we can do all of those things with each other, and people can show up like of so many different experiences and occupy space together. And I think for me, my favorite kind of organizing hands down is with femmes, like always. Like whenever I do retreats, it's with femmes. Whenever I like want to spend sustained time with groups of people, it's with femmes, because I see how often we are behind so many movements, pouring ourselves into it and not ever getting the shine or the love or the support or recognition. So for me, a big part of my life is just like, how can I love y'all better? Like, how can I just love all of the feminist that's happening and be really encouraging and supportive of it? And I do think that, you know, because of the way that sexism plays out, there's a lot of internalized femphobia that other femmes and other like women experience, where they can too be really shady about what it means to be femme. And I have to be really clear about, like, I don't stand for it on any level. Like, I will be very clear about why that's problematic, but I think that that's also why being in queer femme community means that I often don't have to navigate a lot of that, because it's just so whole. And I suggest them also as like, because they have a great Facebook group, and it's also a great way to get connected to like other femmes who are also like on that wave, which feels really, really nice. But a femme saved my life every single day. It's always a femme who's taking care of me. It's always a femme that's like riding me through like a heartbreak. It's always, you know? And I think that the more that, for me, the more I can engage in like just rampant femme worship, the better I feel for myself, and I think the better we are to each other. Like whenever we get together in spaces, we're always like, "You're so pretty. Your hair's so nice. Do you want some water? How can I do nice things for you?" Like that's what femme organizing feels like. It feels incredible, you know. And so much of the other organizing spaces are not like that. That like every time femininity just spills out of me, there's a way that it's being like checked or policed or some sort of like block. But it's this space where we really can just like spill out into each other and be really well received. So I can't even really say enough about how much I really love like queer femmes and queer femininity and the ways that, you know, we hold each other. And I think that finding spaces where we can do that with each other, again, are like super life-saving. Yeah, let's be femme together later.
My question is a bit about perception, especially since I know both of y'all talk a lot about being perceived as a straight couple. And I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about if you struggle with that and if you have any advice on sort of like navigating potentially being perceived as an outsider in spaces that used to be and still are home, so like queer spaces specifically.
Yeah, that happens a lot, and it feels like an erasure. You know what I'm saying? Because we are so committed to queerness, and we are so committed to being in these spaces and to upholding our community. And I'm confronted by that often. You know that the two of us are assumed to be a heterosexual couple, and so we are assumed to not have this level of compassion and this level of engagement. And yeah. Go ahead.
And I think even before being partnered with Teak as a femme, people would often tell me that I was not queer enough, you know, that often my queerness was conferred by my partners, like, oh, your person looks very genderqueer, so like you must be queer. But prior to that, like by myself, I was never queer enough as like a queer femme. And I think that, so I've personally struggled with that like all through my queerness, like from when I came out up until now.
And for me, that struggle started, after I transitioned, because there was a place where I was, a butch lesbian, and there was a very specific place that I can occupy. That there was a place of reverence there. You know what I'm saying? And obviously, that reverence I think is also attributed to this idea of patriarchy and misogyny that exists within our queer communities. That there was so much reverence on being this butch woman, and now coming into places, being told that I'm not queer enough, particularly as a black man, right? So being a cis-assumed person, and it's like, we have to make space. We're talking about the gender spectrum. We have to make space for all types of representation of gender, of all types of representation of masculinity and of femininity, even when it's binary. Like, there are issues with binary masculinity and femininity, right? Those things can be really problematic, but just because that doesn't mean I necessarily am engaging in those things. And even though I may, we have to create space for us to check those things. And it has been heartbreaking, and it's been hard. It's a part of the reason, I'm going to be honest, why there's sometimes I've really checked out of queer spaces, because I'm constantly having to prove myself. Even though I am the person that I am, and I do this work, and I've been in this community for 20 years, and I've finally come to a place where I feel whole and good in my body and in my identity, and coming to a queer community that has been home for me, and and for folks to tell me that this isn't my home anymore, because of who I am is antithetical to what queer is supposed to look like. But queerness belongs to all of us, and so for me to combat that, and I think it's also me being an introvert, and how I handle conflict is oftentimes where I will just kind of remove myself from that and be able to engage in a way from a distance, right? I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm constantly going to be tested, where people are going to constantly, make me prove my value, or make me prove my queerness or my blackness. I'm not going to do it. So for me, I really try not to engage in those things, and to think and to strategize and think about how I can continue to do the work and love myself and be a part of community in a way that feels good.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Hi. So you talked about how hurt people hurt people. So my question is, I realize that I do that too, in a down low level, but I do hurt people. But it's because you realize that you're vulnerable, and you want to find strength, and that's your only way that you see you can find strength at the moment. So how can you, what are other options to make yourself feel strong when you feel very, very vulnerable? And there's so many ways in which people can hurt you.
There's this one link that I often share, and it's you can like Google it, and it's emotional first aid tips, and it's this blog by this woman Vanissar, like Vanissar, and what she talks about is a bunch of like simple body-based practices that we can engage in when we feel really triggered and when we want to do that thing, where we can feel really hurt and we just want to hurt back in order to kind of feel strong, right? And so she talks about a whole bunch of the different ways that happens, and one of the things she really names that's very helpful for me is that is a survival skill, and survival skills are super valuable. Survivor skills are what have kept you alive this whole time. So it's not about shaming yourself for using or having these survival techniques, but it's about really understanding that what helps us survive is not often what helps us thrive. And so knowing when we are in situations where we are in a survival place and being able to distinguish when we're in those places versus when we're in a place where it is more safe for us to be vulnerable. Because it isn't always safe for us to be vulnerable. It isn't always the right place for us to cry or to be our softest selves or any of those sorts of things. And so she really talks about like strategies of how we identify when a situation is like that. I've lived through a lot of like physical trauma in my life, so for me, I can really go to a very quick place of like, I'm protecting myself, I left home when I was 15. I've been by myself for a very long time. Teek knows that like when we fight, it's my like default place to just leave. I'm gonna pack a bag, I'll go, And like, it's really hard for me to get out of that place because it literally has been the thing that has gotten me to the point that I am. If I wasn't able to leave my really unstable, violent home at 15, I wouldn't be alive now. So I have to still find a way of being able to value my body and value my survival strategies and also know, like, I don't have to survive here. Like, that's not what's happening right now. Like, I'm in a different place. Let me just remember where I am and what's going on. And, that might mean I need to take space away from it, like with myself. And I think that that's also something that's important, is trying to cultivate really beautiful space of solitude. So finding the way, the only person who won't abandon you is you. And learning that for me, learning that I'm the one who's really gonna be with me for the rest of my life meant that I really had to learn to find like beautiful opportunities to be with myself. Like taking myself out on the dates I wanna be on. Like setting up like my bathroom in the way that I really, really want it. Like doing those things that are really about figuring out what feels good for me alone, so that when I am in those moments of feeling super triggered, I can go to a space that I've curated for myself, know where I am, feel where I am, and then really start like trying to unpack, like, what do I need in this moment? Like, why am I feeling afraid? Like, what's happening for me? And like writing those things down and reflecting on it. But I would strongly recommend those emotional first aid kits, that emotional first aid kit. It's been really helpful for me to reflect on that. And then also, Brené Brown, she talks a lot about like empathy. I see some people like nodding about it. She doesn't have the same kind of like racial, like gender-based like analysis too, but I think you can pull from a lot of her work in terms of understanding like shame and guilt and empathy and how those things like play up in our bodies, because we really have to learn to understand our trauma if we want to, again, feel something different. And I think a lot of the time when we are traumatized, we just don't want to go back to that place because it was so messed up, and we just want to be somewhere else. But taking the time to go back to the things that have traumatized me and understand why they hurt me and what they've made me do now has been really valuable for trying to have a different response in situations when I feel triggered.
Okay, hello, thank you. Well, we unfortunately have to wrap, but I just wanted to give another round of applause to Teek and Kim. This was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you all for like holding in there and staying with us. Do you mind staying behind for a few more minutes? So they'll be here if you want to come up, and if there are any other burning questions that you didn't get a chance to ask. Also, I really encourage you to visit our website. I don't know the link off the top of my head, but if it's Arthur Brown, and do you know it, Kelly? Okay, Kelly knows it.
It's www.brown.edu. edu/ or is it, I don't know, is it slash or backslash? But it's LGBTQ. So.
Thank you. So you can go there, or you can go to our Facebook page. We have other events coming up. I believe our next event is No Fats, No Films. So No Fats, No Films, Jamal Lewis, who is talking about sex positivity and body positivity from a racialized lens. So yeah, I hope to see all your faces again. And thank you again for coming.